take if you can, in full detail, this next story. How much compensation should people infected with HIV or hepatitis C after receiving infected blood get? Thousands of people infected with contaminated blood in the 70s and 80s faced having their annual payouts reduced under proposed government reforms. The move could leave victims £7,000 a year worse off. Previously, David Cameron has described the infection of people with contaminated products as a tragedy, but the NHS, the Blood Transfusion Service and the Department of Health continue to deny any negligence. Campaign groups angered by the plans have secured an urgent debate over the issue in the Commons today. Members of the campaign group Tainted Blood have been protesting outside the House of Commons. Richard Waring is from Gunnislake. This is Richard's story.
The situation is I'm a severe haemophiliac who was treated with blood products from about 1978 through to the present day. But during the 1970s and 80s, a lot of the blood products were supplied from America and were not heat treated. We weren't aware of the risks of the infection, but I became infected with hepatitis C in about 1985 through untreated blood products.
So you've been living with this for a long time?
I have, yes. I only found out about the infection in 1994 when my wife was already pregnant with our daughter. And that was a terrible time for us because we didn't also know whether she'd been infected and also my daughter was infected. Thankfully, that wasn't the case, but we didn't find out for another 2 or 3 years before we found out whether they were clear or not.
As you say, for years, you and your family must have been beside yourselves.
It was a really anguishing time because I was trying to hold down a full-time job as a college lecturer, which I've been doing for nearly 20 years, and I was becoming more ill sort of as the years went on and finding it difficult to work, knowing as well that we had a young child, we had a house with a mortgage, all the usual bills that everybody has. So it was quite a worrying time.
More than that, I should imagine. And what answers have you learned about why untested blood from the USA was able to be used in this country, untested?
Yeah, this is as the years have gone on and we've found out more information. At the time, we thought it was life-saving treatment. I was receiving my treatment through the NHS, and most of the time the products were supplied by the NHS. But we found that they had a shortfall in supplies back in the 1980s. They then started buying the blood products in from American pharmaceutical companies, and unbeknown to us, these products hadn't been screened and tested properly. They were provided to us as safe, and we just didn't know anything about it. But then years later found out that that wasn't the case. The products that they were supplying were full of HIV and hepatitis C virus, and so they, as a result of that, infected most of the haemophilia population.
But at that time, you would have been lying in hospital, receiving blood, and not giving a second thought as to, is this blood okay?
And, I was trying to hold my job down and keep going and just assumed everything was fine until the first hint of it, there being problems, was in about 1986 when there was the scare about HIV. And so I had to be tested. That was an anguishing time. Fortunately, they told me that I was clear, and so I thought there was no other problems and got on with my life, got married, and then it wasn't till 1984 when we found out, interestingly enough, I'd actually been tested, unbeknown to me, I'd actually been tested for hepatitis C back in 1992.
Unbeknown to you?
Unbeknown to me, and actually not told the result. So I carried on another couple of years before I eventually found out. By which time, of course, we'd had a child, and we didn't know. Cost of it of this as well to us was that we couldn't have any more children. My wife, who was my wife, has now become my carer. So that's kind of destroyed, to some extent, our relationship. Although we've still got a strong marriage. It's been really, really tough. It's been a hard time.
Stressful for everybody.
Yes.
Why has this not been more prevalent in the public domain?
Well, the problem is, I've been trying to do campaigning for years, along with many other haemophiliacs, and have been interviewed many times around the late 1990s. The trouble is, the government has tried to sort of push it under the carpet. They've tried to pacify things and make it out that it was just an unfortunate accident, but as we've uncovered more information, we found out that that's not really the case. Because
there were one-off payments, 2003, 2004, around that time?
That's right. Yes, there was. For years and years, the government said they would not do anything. There was no payments, no nothing. And then, out of the blue, they suddenly decided to make ex gratia payments. This was a payment that was not admitting any fault or responsibility, but just really just to smooth things over. And they provided a one-off payment to all of us of £20,000. And although, on the surface that actually sounds, quite nice to receive £20,000, all it did for us was it staved off the day when we were going to lose our home, because by this stage I'd had to retire on ill health, and we still had a mortgage and a child to support. Basically, the £20,000 just allowed us to reduce our mortgage and keep our home. And so we saw none of the money, really.
And there is a campaign group as well, isn't there, looking for additional payments, annual payments?
That's right. And some people, to be fair, do get annual payments, but they are small. They're just probably a few £1,000s top up, really, which doesn't really make up for losing a full-time job. And the maximum payment at the moment that's made is about just over £14,000. And that is only to the people who have co-infection and who are actually infected with both HIV and hepatitis C can get slightly more money. But they're so seriously ill that they can't work, and really, it's a drop in the ocean.
When you look back, Richard, at everything you've been through all those years, are you still an angry man? Are you still mad about what happened to you and others in your situation?
I think it's fair to say that, I have been angry, but staying angry doesn't really help. It just destroys you. So I'm determined to keep campaigning. I'm campaigning on behalf of my friends who I've watched die. I've been to 2 funerals in the last couple of years. So I'm sad, really. I think that, that it's come to this. But to remain angry doesn't actually have any benefits. It just eats you apart, destroys your own life, and actually there's people out there in the government who don't really care. So, it doesn't really help.
I'm going to ask people if they're interested to grab a pen. I'll let you give out the website address for the group in just a second. After I've asked, how are you now?
Well, now, having moved to Cornwall for a quieter life, I work from home. I do what I can. I registered self-employed, and I basically work from home to keep myself active. But to be fair, the amount I earn really in working this way is probably only a fraction of what I was earning as in my full-time job. So it helps to make up, the shortfall, but not really. So the part of what we're campaigning for is, some proper redress, really, which would make up for no amount of money really can make up for what's really happened, but it would help, and it would just avoid us having to go cap in hand to charities to try and get support and help, and that would make the difference.
We've all learnt a lot from you today, Richard, and to learn even more, what is that website address? Right,
if you go to www.taintedblood.info.
Taintedblood.info.
Yes, I think that's the address, which will have all the details of the campaign that's going on. And there is today a debate, a backbench debate taking place in Westminster,
Yes.
Which is going to be about 3 hours. It's been protected as a 3-hour window, taking place at about 3:15 this afternoon. So we'll be going through the whole thing, and the government consultation that is ongoing, and trying to deal with the payments and making a final settlement.
That's an extraordinary story, isn't it? Richard Waring from Gunners Lake, I spoke to him earlier today. What do you make of it? What Richard has had to say? Has it affected you? Please call us 0345 301 1034. You can text 81333, starting your message with the word Devon. You can email devondebates@bbc.co.uk. Don't forget, text charge at a standard message rate, and standard geographic call charges from landlines and mobiles apply. Other ways to get in touch as well.
Keep us in your timeline.
Search for BBC Radio Devon on Facebook or Twitter.
Richard mentioned the campaign group. Let's go to Westminster. Sue Threakall is from Barnstable, co-chair of the campaign group Tainted Blood, protesting today outside the House of Commons ahead of this afternoon's debate. Good afternoon to you, Sue.
Hello.
Are you outside the House at the moment?
I am. I'm right underneath Big Ben, so I hope it doesn't clang while we're doing this.
Oh, they've been putting in that new tube line underneath. You watch yourself, girl.
Yeah.
So, please tell us your story.
My story began back in the 80s. I married Bob Threakall in 1981. In 1983, we had our son. I had 2 stepsons also from his previous marriage, and everything was fine. We got a beautiful house. I had a fantastic job as a deputy head teacher of the local primary school. He was a senior civil servant, which is a bit ironic, really. And in 1985, everything came crashing down round us when he tested positive for HIV, which he'd contracted as a result of his treatment for severe haemophilia. And it was interesting that when he first started to use this new treatment, he was very, very reluctant to take it at all. He really didn't want to have the injections, and I couldn't understand why. But he used to say, well, you don't know what's in it. And in hindsight, no, we didn't. We hadn't got a clue what was in it. But research and time has proven to all of us that the government knew quite well what was in it. The UK Haemophilia Centre Directors Association knew even better what was in it, and more to the point, they quite deliberately targeted the haemophilia population with this treatment, and they quite deliberately phased out the previously used and much safer treatment, which was called cryoprecipitate.
Are you still there, Sue? I think the line may have dropped out. Are you still with us there, Sue? Okay, sorry, Sue. And
I am.
Your husband, sadly, passed away, didn't he?
Yeah, he passed away in 1991. I gave up work in 1990 in order to look after him. And because life at home at that point was intolerable, he was so very poorly, and we had the 3 children, and it was just so difficult. So I gave up my career, never really got back into it properly, and I've done a dozen different jobs since. He died in the spring of 1991, and I've campaigned ever since. We were involved in the early campaigning, which was set up by the Haemophilia Society in those days, and we've just kind of carried on, and it's taken legs of its own, really. We've got a fantastic group of people in the campaign, but these are people that should not be campaigning. They're people who are very sick, or they're bereaved children, they're parents who've lost a child. We're all getting older. We've grown old together campaigning for 30 years.
What do you hope that, coupled with the debate in the House this afternoon and your protest, would achieve? In an ideal world, Sue, what would be the result?
In an ideal world, I would like them to acknowledge that they have completely messed up big time here. It was quite bad enough with previous governments who didn't even pretend to take that much notice of us. But this government has, in fairness and to their credit, sat down with us at meetings. They appeared to listen to us. They've met with us and so on. When it came to the consultation, they couldn't have got it more wrong. The consultation which is out at the moment gives us 2 choices. One is to stick with the present system of ex gratia support, which has been acknowledged from the top downwards that has been completely unfit for purpose, totally inadequate, grossly underfunded historically. It's like as Richard said earlier, a begging bowl. It's so humiliating for people. And we want them the other choice, I'm sorry I lost my thread there, the other choice that they've got on there is a new option that they put forward as option 2. We can either stick with the old system, which doesn't work, or have option 2, which basically leaves every single person worse off. I've had people ringing me up sobbing down the phone, I'm going to lose 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 a year still. I don't know what to do. I won't be able to pay my bills. I won't be able to pay my mortgage. I'll have to sell the house. What do we do? And to put people in this position, I cannot believe how they've got it so catastrophically badly wrong.
Just one final point I'd like to make, if I may, Sue, and there's something that this doesn't make sense to me. That money has been paid out. Mm-hmm. Our present Prime Minister, David Cameron, has apologised, but yet nobody has accepted liability.
Well, they won't accept liability because the moment they accept liability, they know, and we know, everybody is aware, that they will have to pay out damages that are consistent with them being liable. In other words, compensation level damages, which is why they won't accept liability, because then they can get away with paying ex gratia, which means no liability payments. What we want to see is a proper system put in place, like the Scots have just started to do. Theirs isn't perfect, but can I just give you one contrast? As a widow of someone who had both HIV and hepatitis C and a multitude of other things, I am entitled to have my income topped up to £19,000 a year, which is £1,000 a year less than I was earning in 1990. If I was under the new system, I will get cast aside, given £5,000 and just thrown out with no further support whatsoever. The Scottish system, if I was in Scotland now and Bob had been infected through a Scottish product, I would be having £28,000 a year and access to a full system of grants.
It's one of these anomalies that we find in all sorts of laws, in all sorts of situations, whatever the story, that it's different in Scotland than it is in England for some reason.
It's worse than an anomaly because all the infections took place under a Westminster government. The Scots have dealt with this now post-devolution because health is a devolved issue. In the past, all the infections happened under Westminster before devolution happened, and therefore, to me, it's completely abhorrent, it's immoral to afford one country a reasonable system of payment and to actually cut the money in another country.
I know that 25 years on from losing your husband, Sue, you sound like somebody that's not going to give up on this, and please let us know if there's any advance in this story, would you?
I certainly will, and there's no way any of us are going to give up. People have fought literally to their dying breath. And that's what we've all pledged to do.
We appreciate your time this afternoon. You take care in London, okay?
Yeah, thanks for having us on. Thanks for covering it.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. That's Sue Threakall from Barnstable. Maybe it's made you think, and maybe it's made you feel for those affected widows, widowers, all those years on. If you'd like to hear your views today, love to hear from you. 0345 301 1034 is our number here at BBC Radio Devon.